Hey folks, I would say that about 35 to 40% of my videos are spurred by someone else's stupidity. So this is going to be another one of those. This is going to be another one of those. Now, I want to make this very clear. There might be something that you would consider to be a spoiler for the Masters of the Universe movie in this video. So if you're worried about that, it's not really a spoiler, but it kind of is. Then you go ahead and scroll away. But if if you're not worried about just basically what you see in the trailers being talked about, then you should be fine. Now, I know this is kind of a weird way to start the video, but believe me, it all comes together. Okay, so I saw a review of somebody talking about Masters of the Universe, the movie. And he started his video by saying this movie was shit. It was awful. It was horrible. And then he, like, after giving his opinion of it very briefly, he said, anytime you have a movie or a project like this that is just there to sell toys, you know it's going to be bad. And first of all, what that tells me immediately is that he has no idea what the fuck he's talking about. Completely and totally ignorant to the history of where all these characters come from. And if you don't understand at least at some basic level where these characters come from and what He-Man was all about, then yeah, this movie's not going to be for you. And that should be very obvious from fucking the trailers. But I think that what they do in this movie is really, really fucking powerful and beautiful. And that's why I wanted to talk about it. So if you remember, the cartoon He-Man in every episode says, by the power of Grayskull, I have the power. And he holds the sword up and he turns into He-Man, right? He goes from Prince Adam to He-Man. He transforms into this barbarian type character that has the strength and the power of the god. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that actually is very, very, very intentional. And what I mean by that is when they were formulating, the whole idea. Now, keep in mind, it was to sell these toys. It was to sell a toy line. When they were formulating that idea, they had internal discussions and then some focus groups that they did. And in those focus groups findings with actually child psychologists, which this should give you an idea of how marketing works, because this is genuinely what they did. They went and they talked to child psychologists to try to find an end, something that would really hook kids, right? And they do this in every form of marketing ever. They talk to psychologists. So everything that I talk about when I talk about this is marketing, there's a good chance that you've been marketed to. The things that you love, the things that you really, it's because of this. This is a good example of that. Now, they talked to child psychologists, and what they found, this is back in the 80s, what they found, and I'm sure it's not any different now, is that young men, boys, and even young girls had a sense of powerlessness. Now, obviously, their focus was on selling toys to boys then, so they were the primary target. Now, obviously, they go on to market to girls in She-Ra, but for He-Man, they're looking to market to boys. And what they find is that boys have a very strong sense of being powerless. They felt powerless at home. They were just told what to do. They had to do chores. They had to do this. They had to do that. They didn't feel like they had any personal power. So when they had this, armed with this information, they started to try to find something that would make boys feel like they could be powerful. And that's how they arrived at basically holding up a magic sword and saying, I have the power. Now, what's interesting about that is that they did internal studies past that. And this is something that isn't talked about that much, but this is actually very accurate. They would go and they did these internal studies, and they would do, it was like focus groups basically. And they would talk to parents of these young boys who, after watching He-Man and playing with He-Man toys and things like that, these boys literally, honestly felt more powerful because when they would play, they would say, I have the power. They'd hold the figure up and they'd say, I have the power. And they'd hold up the sword that the He-Man holds up and they'd say, I have the power. And those basically reciting those words of I have the power, like, changed the confidence of these young men. It made them feel like, well, they were powerful. And I think that when you look at that and you understand that there is an entire fucking industry now, it was there a little bit, but now there's literally an entire industry, whether it be through self-help or life coaching or some therapies or whatever it is. Like, all of these things are just derivative of I have the power, right? Like, you see people talking, there's famous TikTokers and all these people that's all they're selling. That's literally all they're selling is the message of I have the power. And I'm not saying it started there, because obviously there was more than that. They were already doing marketing like self-help and shit like that, and power of positive thinking and all that. But this is a very, very important concept to understand. And so when you fast forward, and this is the part where it gets a little spoilery, when you fast forward to the movie today, you have a character in Adam who is on Earth and is being talked down to by HR, and is not able to get a date, and is, really just goofy and nerdy and doesn't fit in, and doesn't he's all of the things that a lot of young men and a lot of people that, people point their finger and say, look, the male loneliness epidemic, a lot of those men feel disaffected. And at some point in time, he just yearns to go home. Like, that's what it's all about. And that's why he searches out and like finds the sword. It's all very, in the movie, it's all done very choppy and kind of quick. And there's not a whole lot of, they don't spend a lot of time on this. So don't worry that it's like some deep think piece on, young men's pathos or anything. That's not really the point of it, but it's there. It's like a subtext. And it's important to understand that there is something there. There is something important. There's a message there about having the power, about having the ability to change yourself, that I think is so fucking important. I've literally made hundreds of videos now talking about the ability, like, we have the power to change ourselves. We have the ability to grow, to learn, to become better. That's what He-Man does. Now, if you go see the movie, you'll understand that they're approaching it very thoughtfully in the movie, right? Like, this is not just the average, like, there's a line in the movie where the sorceress literally says to He-Man, again, spoilers, where the sorceress says, all of the previous people that have held that sword have just used brute strength, which you're not like that. And that's the point, right? Like, He-Man is not like that. He's not just brute strength. He has that ability. He has the ability to be physical. He has the ability to do those things, but it's about emotional intelligence. It's about empathy. It's about being better, right? That's what this He-Man, and not just this version of He-Man, but really, honestly, every version of He-Man has ever been about, is learning and growing and being a better version of yourself. It's not just about a magical transformation. It's about understanding that we have the power. And so when I see a creator get on this app, or wherever it may be, and say, well, anything that's built on a toy is fucking awful and you should expect it to suck shit, I just think, how ignorant must you be? How ignorant must you be to try to take away the opportunity for somebody to go see a movie, a story, literally about somebody coming into their power, somebody trying to find the power that they need to have to change the world. What is wrong with people today where they see a message like that, even if it's, with a bunch of flashing lights and green tigers and shit like that, even if it's hidden among that? How dare people get on here and take away from that message? A message which quite literally changed the lives of probably millions of young men. Probably millions. And then, because of the success of that line, and the fact that it was like, like the 80s was like the most misogynistic era perhaps ever, then after that success, they decided to market the same way to She-Ra fans, to young women. And I think that when you think about that and the effect that She-Ra had, even though she doesn't actually say, when she transforms, she doesn't say, I have the power. She says, for the honor of Grayskull, I am She-Ra. And that's a different message, but I think that because it kind of came after He-Man and the I have the power thing, I think that a lot of young girls still felt powerful because of it. And I think about that. I understand how I felt about it back then. I understood how it affected me. And I think that it's just such a wonderful, wonderful message for people to have. And it is proven by the fact that, like I said, it's a multi-billion-dollar idea of just telling people you have the power. And so, to finish the video, I would just say, say it with me: by the power of Grayskull, I have the power. Take care of yourself. Take care of others. I'll talk to you soon.